The transfer football portal is open, and Iowa has already landed two commitments, two big ones for Iowa football in 2026. Plus, Iowa Hoop shows that they can win in different ways. We break it down today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Network, your team every day, now number one for sports podcasts. I've been covering the Hawkeyes for over 20 years on the radio. You can hear me currently on the Iowa Sports Radio Network with stations all across the state. Sioux City, the Quad Cities, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and our flagship 106.3 KXNO in Des Moines. You can hear me each weekday from noon to 2. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we got a lot to get into from the weekend that was, including a trip for me over to Carver Hawkeye Arena to see Ben McCollum's squad in action. Took my kindergartner over there, had a great time as Iowa gets the win. We'll talk about the environment, and we'll talk about how Iowa got it done. A rough second half at times, but a nice win against UCLA, and one that shows that Iowa can win in a myriad of different ways. But we talk a lot of portal. We're going to talk about some of the prospects that are still out there, some of the big names that Iowa is involved with, and guys that certainly make a lot of sense for Iowa football. But before that, let's get into the commitments, as Iowa has landed two football commitments for this class in the transfer portal in the opening weekend of things. And this thing's going to be hot and heavy. This 2-week sprint that we have in front of us, trying to fill in the pieces, figure things out. And I think another thing we need to realize as we go back a couple of years ago, Iowa brought in that big class with 13 guys that they got from the transfer portal, bigger than I think you normally anticipate from Iowa. And that number certainly dwindled down a year ago. But with this new window, you also have to put in context the way this is set up now for Iowa football and the roster limits that are in place. A year ago at this time, they were still trying to figure out what was going to happen to the walk-ons. How many of those guys were they going to be able to keep? And, Iowa did the right thing. They worked for the guys that they didn't have spots for in that 105 roster limit that was put in place by the NCAA, and then it was walked back. But they did the right thing. And with that, you had some guys that are there. Well, now you don't have the same kind of roster flexibility that you had in the past. Yes, you had 85 scholarships that you were able to give out, and then all the walk-ons that went on top of it. But Iowa, there were years that they had 120, 125 players on the roster, and not the case anymore. And that leads to, you have to be a little bit more selective, certainly in this process, than they were a couple of years ago when they brought in that big haul. You look at what Tyler Barnes, the Iowa GM, is doing currently. You look at the follows that he has on Twitter when he's following different guys out there, and you're going to see at this point in time, definitely targeting the middle of the defensive tackle at the forefront of things. We're going to talk about one of those D tackles coming up. Looking at wide receiver, those are two positions I think of the highest need that they get. But let's get into first the commitments from the weekend, as we come to you here late on Sunday night, starting with the first commitment that they got out of the portal, Anthony Hawkins, a defensive back from Villanova. Now, this is a guy that has some versatility, I think likely targeted, though, as a safety, but did play a little bit of cornerback at Villanova. Good size, 6'3", kind of that lankier frame. He looks very much like a Xavier Wampa type back there. And you just think now of that safety group that they have. And after losing Cale Kolarek to the transfer portal, a guy that I think some people anticipated at minimum was going to maybe have a chance to get some snaps this season defensively. We did see him a little bit, and of course the special team stalwart that he turned into. But with Anthony Hawkins, they get a guy with that position flexibility. And speaking of flexibility, and this is something that has been so big for Phil Parker throughout the years, is having those guys that can do a myriad of different things. And after the bringing in the cash position and moving away from the traditional 4-3 defense and going to this 4-2-5 look that they're employing with the 4 down linemen, now 2 linebackers and 5 defensive backs, the cash position has been so interesting because we've seen them do it with different body types. They've had the big bruising type. They've had the more lankier athletic guy. I mean, you go through and you look at the different players that have played this position, and all of them have taken it then. I go back to Las Vegas out there for Big Ten football media days and talking to Cohen Entringer, who we thought maybe was going to be that guy at cash, and we see him back at the safety position. But, he was a guy that understood kind of the way that it was set up, understood what that position means for the Iowa defense, and he was ready to take over the role if that was the case, if that was the way things were going to play out. Well, Entringer's back, and now Zach Lutmer's back. And on top of it, you add Anthony Hawkins to the mix, coupled with what we saw from some of those young defensive guys. Deshaun Lee, he's going to be back and really had a lot of growth at quarterback, I thought, this season. And then what we saw late in the year, a guy like Rashad Godfrey that came in and the ability that he had. Watson, what he was able to do late in the season and playing in the bowl game. So I think we got to see enough out of those guys. And certainly with Godfrey, I think he's a guy that has that position flexibility. Maybe he does turn out to be a guy that turns into maybe a safety type. But regardless of all that, a really good one, and excited with the versatility that they get with the guy with like Hawkins that's going to come in there. And he could tell. They brought him in for a visit right away. This was, I'm sure, somebody that was towards the top of the wish list for Phil Parker and the rest of the staff. Anthony Hawkins is a Hawk, and how about that? The second one is incredibly important, and that is Eli Ozick, who comes in from North Dakota State. Good numbers at North Dakota State, hit a 50-plus yarder, only missed 2 field goals a year ago, 16 of 18 in his field goal attempts. He is the heir apparent to Drew Stevens. He will have, obviously, the upper hand you'd anticipate for that one. A guy that comes in with experience at the collegiate level at North Dakota State. Also love that he's coming from a program like that. He's coming from a program that, no, they're not playing in front of 80,000 fans at a stadium or anything like that. Still, North Dakota State, year in and year out, they're playing in big games. They're playing in important games. And there are pressure situations that certainly Ozick has seen throughout the course of his 2-year career at North Dakota State. Good leg, solid, and a good replacement. Another one that he was on a visit. He was at Carver on Saturday. You could tell this was another one that they were working to set up right away. This is something that they wanted to have figured out. And as we talked about on the last podcast, special teams is going to look a whole lot different. LeVar Woods departing. Reese Dakin, who is now going to Michigan State, he is departing. You need to find a new punter. At least getting this first one out of the way with your kicker, the importance of kicker at the University of Iowa. This was a big one, certainly, for the Hawkeyes to be able to go out there and get them. So 2 commitments here, and we got other things to get into, and that includes some other of the targets that are there. Now, Kamari Brown, the Elon defensive end, it was also in on a visit. No word yet on him sitting here on Sunday evening about a commitment. He's still got a couple other visits set up, but good to get a couple of guys already in the fold. Again, we're talking about a 2-week sprint here to get this all done. Let's talk about a couple of the other prospects that Iowa is still looking at. I think some of the other guys towards the top of their wish list. Let's start at wide receiver. And a couple of guys that stand out. We talked about this guy a little bit later in the week last week. Everydayers, you certainly will know that. Tony Diaz, a guy down at UT Rio Grande Valley, wide receiver, more that slot type, kind of an inside guy, but a lot of other programs, big offers that are after him. Tony Diaz, though, sounds like Iowa working to get him in and seeing an opportunity, obviously, for him to come in right away and help out that wide receiver group in a different body type than what they have returning with Reese Vanderzee, with the return of Dayton Howard, getting that smaller, quicker type of wide receiver out there. Another one, though, that I think is incredibly intriguing is Cade Wolford. So Wolford, Ohio kid, out there playing in the MAC, had decent season here as a redshirt freshman this year, but he looks like a Caden Weegan replacement. The kick return that he has, a return ability that he's already shown in his young career, got a lot of eligibility. But the thing I love about him, had a ton of rushing touchdowns at the high school level. He is that Swiss Army knife. He can run it. He can catch it. He can do a lot of different things. We saw what they tried to do with Weegan here these last couple of years, and looks like somebody else that could fill that role. And another important one, though, when you talk about the return game and what that means for Iowa. A couple other names for you at defensive tackle. One, Khalil Poteet, who is out making the transfer portal, entering from Temple. year of eligibility. Obviously, the departure of Aaron Graves, who moves on. Jonah Pace came in this year. Thought he did a pretty decent job of filling that role. Hawthorne will be back this season, but they're looking for bodies at defensive tackle. And now talk about a need position along with wide receiver. I think DT is definitely towards the top of that one. Another defensive tackle, Bryce Stevenson from Holy Cross. His dad played at Florida State. Has been at Holy Cross, just 1 year of eligibility for him. Good size, though, 6'2", 300 pounds. Come in there. That would be a big one as well. And then a couple other names. Two more for you in the portal that I think are intriguing. Parker Knudsen, Southwest Missouri State, playing at the D2 level. Highly, highly productive during his collegiate career. He's a safety type defensive back. You do wonder with the commitment of Anthony Hawkins, though, if that changes things for Knudsen. Just one to keep an eye on. And then finally, they do have a look at a running back. Really productive guy, Evan Dickens from Liberty. Liberty played in a BCS level bowl game a couple years ago. Good program. Took a big step back, though, from what they had been this season. Still, Dickens was incredibly important and a big numbers that he put up this past season. We've already talked about the departures at the running back position. TJ Washington moving on, just couldn't find a role. Jazzion Patterson, he's going to move on. I think he's going to do a good job wherever he ends up. But depth, maybe starting to thin out a little bit. Certainly if there's another one, got to be looking there. But this could change things. And you do wonder if there are other departures at the running back spot if Iowa goes a little bit bigger fish. That's been the case here. We haven't seen any of those big names. And I don't know if there will be. It's not just going out there and acquiring talent. I think any of us that follow every Iowa football, and I'm sure most everybody that is watching and listening does, you know the way that they operate. And you can be upset about it, and you can be frustrated, and you can want more, and you can want different, but let's live in reality. And the reality is that it's not just about talent. You also have to fit the culture. And if you don't fit the culture, you're not going to be there. And maybe more importantly, you're not going to last. Fit has to matter. I know a lot of people are already hoping Ian Strong, who we saw in that game against Rutgers, he's entered the portal, big-time wide receiver, that he's going to make his way to Iowa State, or at minimum, make a visit. We haven't seen that yet. Iowa has not been involved with those type of guys coming from the Power 4 conference level. Can that still happen? Absolutely. It's a 2-week absolute craziness going on, and we got you covered here, Locked On Hawkeyes. Let's talk some hoops. Saturday, great environment over at Carver Hawkeye Arena. So excited I was able to get over there with my little guy. We'll talk a little bit about the experience. Talk about, more importantly, though, the Iowa win as they get it done against UCLA, a big one. 13-point victory in the end against the Bruins. That's as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app right before the action start. Checked it out last Friday. Absolutely awesome. So many great ideas in there. There's some bonuses in there, some surprises for you. It goes on Fridays from 5 o'clock to 6:30 Central Time. That's 6 to 7:30 Eastern. It's appointment viewing for NBA Happy Hour. It's easy to check out the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. And the timing's perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend start. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, 5 to 6:30 Central Time. Got you covered with basketball, and it's not just for the NBA. They got you covered as we come down the stretch here for the final couple of college football games. Obviously, the playoffs getting ready, the tournament starting up in the NFL, and they got you covered with all the Hawkeye basketball on the FanDuel app. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Trent Condon back with you here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Let's go to Carver on Saturday. Iowa gets the win against UCLA, 74-61. Another tremendous performance out of Bennett Sturtson. The capper at the horn with 5 seconds remaining in the game, splash it in the 26-footer. as would have been a shot clock violation. He took a peek over at Coach McCollum. He said, fire it up. He fires it up, and Sturtz knocks down the three-pointer, finishes with 27 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, a couple of steals in the game, and he did it while battling foul trouble. Maybe the most eye-opening aspect of the box score is seeing Bennett Sturtson only playing 35 minutes in a game like this. Well, the reason was because of foul trouble. And it was interesting as they were coming down the closing stretch inside of the last 8 minutes, and I see him over the bench, and I see a whistle, and he's still sitting over there. Being at the game, don't have my box score. I got my kindergartner with me, so not quite as engaged into the numbers as I normally am. What's going on here? Now, I was concerned maybe there was some kind of injury or something like that. Obviously, that was not the case, but your mind starts to race a little bit. Came back in, though, was able to do it, and I thought it was interesting after the game that Iowa coach Ben McCollum mentioned that he wanted to put him back in there with the 4 fouls with like 8 minutes to go, and the assistant coaches overrid him. And that's the right move. That's the right move. You have to have him in the game. Couple other aspects of this one at the top of my notes. Not going to look great overall in the box score, but I thought Cooper Koch was really good again. Had a couple of 3-pointers. He's got to knock those down. Look, we can't get too upset about a guy that's shooting, 45% from the 3-point line when he misses a couple. Had a couple of good looks, and including 1 or 2 in the second half that just got to knock those down. Overall, until that Sturtz 3-pointer with 5 seconds left, I was 0-9 from the 3-point line in the second half after Fool Garrison Company really got going in the first half and we're knocking down 3-pointers. But back to Cooper Koch, I thought what we see out of him and the continued growth on the defensive end of the floor. There are a couple of hedges. I thought he was tremendous. A couple of times he got switched on Donovan Dent and didn't look out of place, where at the beginning of the season he would have looked out of place against Donovan Dent. And I told you, Donovan Dent, that dude's a stud coming in for New Mexico for UCLA this season. Still, though it doesn't show up in the box score, I thought Cooper Koch was really good, really active, and did a lot of good things for them all overall in the game. Kilcombe struggled. And one thing that I would like to see is when you have those performances, missed both ends of a couple of free throws, had a couple of just careless turnovers, one that I thought really started to get the run going for UCLA there during the second half, is if it's a game like that, relying even more on Isaiah Howard. Now, I know Howard played 29 minutes in the game, and he was really good. And when Sturtz isn't in there, and if Combs doesn't have it, they just don't have a ton of guys that can just do it off the bounce like he can. Another thing that I love to see, and I mentioned Fool Garrison knocking down the 3-pointers in the first half, but they were really going through him, and really the offense was going through him when Sturtz wasn't in the game. And they were getting into him, out there on the extended elbow, doing some things on the side post, doing different factors with Fool Garrison. That he's such a smart player, really, really talented. Talk about some of that carelessness we saw from Combs. There were times I thought we got the same thing out of Fool Garrison, but as we mentioned before, if this team is going to take a big step, and if this is going to be a team that has a chance to advance, get past the round of 32 this season, Fool Garrison is going to be a big, big part of that. Tate Sage had a couple opportunities, did a couple of good things too. He's another guy that can do things off the bounce, but definitely tighten up the rotation. Just 8 guys see action there. Didn't see any Brendan Hassan. Didn't see any Trevor Urach in this one. It was going with the dudes and that 8-man rotation as they get the victory. What I liked about this game, though, one of the biggest aspects that really jumped off is just being able to win this one. You're up 40-17 at one point. Yeah, it was a 5-0 run to end the first half, 40-22 at the half. They come out, defensive intensity by UCLA ratcheted up, and I was able to find a way, with Bennett Sturtson having to sit for a little bit. This is another one of those the growth aspect out of this squad. Here's another thing that Ben McCollum mentioned after the game, and it was that these guys had plenty of opportunities. These guys had other places that they could have gone. And he talked about the environment. And that's where I want to go next. And being back in Carver. And a year ago, took the boys trip over with me and my son. It was the first time just us two had gone. He'd gone a couple of times as a real little guy. But this was the first time. It was just me and him, dad and the guy, going over. And went to the Michigan State game. And in fact, speaking of Cooper Koch earlier, Dad JR was just a couple of rows in front of us. And as we were watching that one, the crowd was okay. The crowd felt different on Saturday. And the crowd felt different than it has a while for Iowa basketball. Everydayers, you certainly know that I defended Fran at different times. There were also things that drove me nuts. The 2-foul rule in the first half, the usage of timeouts, the refusal at times to call a timeout instead of what it was a 6-0 spurt turned into a 12-0 run. But that aside, Fred McCaffrey did some good things. But I think for so many people, the program had stagnated. And to get back a coach that definitely loves Iowa, a coach that knows what he's doing on both ends of the floor, that is just that new blood. It has brought this new sense to the fan base. And in today's environment where people have so many options and where it's so easy just to flip on the TV and start times are all over the place. And it's not like it was in the 80s when I was growing up and you knew that I was playing on Thursday night and they're playing again on Saturday. And that was that. And that's not the case anymore. You don't know if the game's going to start at 7 or 7:30 or 6 or 5:30. It's different. I understand that. And Iowa women's basketball has got a big chunk of the fan base. And Iowa wrestling's still there every single time. People have a lot more entertainment options than they did back then. Back when Lute Olson formed the Iowa Basketball Network across the state, and what we saw in terms of just those numbers, huge numbers that they got television-wise. It's a different world. But the fan base is there. And having a game like that where it was fun and it was energized. And you got a guy in the sideline of Ben McCollum that wants to not just be there coaching, but wants to re-engage this fan base. Great win, great environment, really enjoyed it. Little guy got a Carver cone. He was pumped up about that. He got a stuffed herky. He was also pumped up about that. And now that he's got his little guy that he sleeps with in the evening, he likes that as well. As he's got his herky with him that he snuggled with every single night. But great environment, really enjoyed it. Carver, love to see what they're working to do. And they did that without the students, obviously. Students will be coming back here pretty soon. And speaking of the students coming back, that's what we're going to talk about next, is taking this to another level. Because Iowa's got one coming up this week that could be huge. Huge not just for this team and pecking order in the Big Ten and seeding in the Big Ten tournament and the like, but maybe going forward. Big week for Iowa basketball. We'll talk about it and what's ahead this week here on Locked On Hawkeyes as we have a start time. Sunday, Iowa, Illinois, and what could be one of the bigger games we've seen for men's basketball at Carver Hawkeye Arena in quite a while. We'll talk about that on the other side of Locked On Hawkeyes. There's nothing like college football season, though it is dwindling down. Just 3 games to go. The tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I opened the Game Time app. In fact, I did it for the game against UCLA, got a couple of tickets for us, 20 rows up, great price, and I loved that I knew exactly what I was paying. No surprise fees in the Game Time app. Upfront pricing knows exactly what it was going to be. It was also a spot I haven't been in Carver in a long time. Well, I got to see exactly what our view is going to be and also the view for my 6-year-old son. Yeah, that's important. And you can see your view from the seat on the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying college tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Trent Condon back with you one final time here. Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. If you haven't already, make sure you go check out our new Everydayer Club. It's an opportunity for you to get ad-free Locked On Hawkeyes. It works with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major podcast apps that are out there. We also have a members-only Discord server, and we're going to be doing some game watches with you. We're going to be sitting and watching the games together. That is available for people in our Everydayer Club. Go check it out right now, lockedonhawkeyes.supercast.com. See if that's something for you. Ad-free episodes of Locked On Hawkeyes. As we wrap things up the week ahead. So the start time has been announced for Iowa, Illinois on Sunday. That will be an 11 a.m. Central Time tip-off with the Illini coming to town. Huge matchup, huge opportunity. Iowa in the top 25, Illinois there as well. Two teams, not only that, you get this thing on Big Fox. I mean, you talk about the lead-in that this is going to be leading into the NFL playoffs. That'll be on Fox a little bit later in the day in the wild card round as you get the 49ers and the Eagles with the 30-30 tip-off. And Iowa, Illinois will start off the day on Fox and their local programming, just how big that's going to be, and certainly going to be some eyeballs there for that one. But before that, Iowa's got to get the win against Minnesota. This is a Minnesota team that is starting to play a little bit better. Year number one of Niko Medved, who I know a lot of people probably remember for his days when he was at Drake for a season before departing and going out to Colorado State. Has done a nice job. Still, this Minnesota team, you go back, they had an overtime win against Doug Gottlieb and UW Green Bay, who's not good. They struggled against Chicago State. We saw the Chicago State team. Now, they won 4 in a row, and they've won 5 out of 6, including wins against Northwestern on the road this weekend. And also, back in the beginning of December, they got a win at home against Indiana. And that Indiana win shows us, obviously, the power of the home court advantage in conference play. A couple of guys that can knock down shots. Still, Medved's team, they're going to play slow. It's going to be built much like Iowa. It's probably going to be a grinded out. First one to 65 maybe wins this type of game. Still, Iowa in the game. Ken Pomeroy has them favored by 6. This, when you look at the road games, this is one you definitely need to put in the win column if you're talking about finishing in the top third. And I think that is now a realistic goal for Iowa basketball. Finish in the top 6 of this 18-team league. That is absolutely a realistic goal for this team. I think there can be even more than that, but let's just start right there. Starts with the road victory, getting it done against Minnesota. That's coming up on Tuesday for the Hawks. Over on women's basketball, week in front. It starts tonight at 7:30 as they go to Chicago, Evanston, and take on Northwestern. Northwestern started off the year 6-0. Had a win against DePaul, pretty good women's program. And since then, they've lost 8 in a row. It's a road game, but don't screw around. Go in there, dominate, get the victory. Then after that, Iowa's got a pretty big layoff as they don't play again until Sunday themselves. That'll be at 4 o'clock on the road at Indiana. And this is another game. Indiana, obviously over the last half decade, how good their women's program has been. We've seen a lot of epic matchups with Iowa and Indiana. Obviously, one jumps to mind, the Caitlin Clark buzzer beater for the Big Ten championship. This is not the same Indiana team. Still tough. Still going to be a team that's going to be able to score on you, but a winnable road game here. Iowa could go 4-0 this week. We're going to be having a different conversation about Hawkeye hoops, certainly, next week. But the biggest thing throughout the course of this week and the next 2 weeks will be the transfer portal. We will have you covered here on Locked On Hawkeyes with the names, with the visits, what's happening. We got the latest for you. We'll bring in some of our experts. We'll be talking with Tom Kakert from Hawkeye Report, David Eichel from Hawkeye Insider. We'll get their perspective, 2 guys heavily involved in the recruiting game, and get you breaking down everything that is happening in the transfer portal. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. That lets you know exactly when we are live with you, when we are going, and when you got a new episode each and every day here on the Locked On Network. If you're on the podcast side, hit subscribe as well. Also, 5-star reviews over there really help us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. And don't forget, yes, we also got you covered each and every day with our Everydayer Club, where you can get Locked On Hawkeyes ad-free, plus our members-only Discord access, and a whole lot more. Head over to lockedonhawkeyes.supercast.com and join the club right now. And for those on video, also got you covered with the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. As always, thanks for being with us. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We'll recap what we see with Iowa Northwestern on the women's side and the latest on the football transfer portal. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you then. Until then, go Hawks.